Okay. Let's see. Basically, the Masechtas Eiruvin is a continuation of Shabbos. We're discussing Shabbos. We discussed carrying from one domain to another, and in Eiruvin it's a continuation of that. Now, there's the actual structure of the partitions that create the domains. And then there's the food that's placed where people join together, the residence, what's considered residence. In the beginning of the Masechta, we're discussing just what's considered partitions, what makes the domain into the domain, how the partitions work. So it starts off with an alleyway, and the alleyway is just an area that's surrounded by three sides. In this case, it could be an alleyway that goes through, but here it's an alleyway that's surrounded on three sides, and the courtyards enter into the alleyway. But what we're going to discuss is how to close off the entrance to the alleyway, that it should be considered a private domain. Biblically, it's a private domain anyway, but rabbinically, we want to close that off. Now, are we actually closing it, or are we just putting a marker there so we should see the difference? That we'll see in the Gemara. So it starts off, if you have an alleyway, and it misses the main point, that you're using a beam that's going across the entrance of the alleyway to show you that that's the end of the alleyway. So if this beam is above 20 amas, maybe the beam is placed on the walls of the alleyway. So Mavi it's not referring to the beam, it's actually referring to the alleyway. So you put the beam across the top of it, so then the halacha is Yomayit, you have to lower that beam down. So more than 20 amas doesn't do the trick. Rabbi Yehuda says it's not necessary. Rabbi Yehuda is Rabbi Eily. He's a student of Rabbi Akiva. And he holds that this beam could be above 20 amas. How high could it be? We'll see. But 20 amas isn't the limit. It could be higher than that. Now, what we're talking about is that there's people that are using this alleyway and they're carrying in it. They want to be able to carry in it. But there's a Rosh Hashanah that's going across the front of it. So we have to show that where the end of the alleyway is, and you put a beam across to show that that's the end of it. It shouldn't carry out. It should be a divide. If it's wider than 10 amas, you have to make it less. We started with the height, now we're talking about the width. Why? If it's wider, then it's not considered an opening. You're allowed to have entrances, but wider than 10 amas is not an entrance. It's considered a pirza. It's a breach in the wall. It's not really an entrance. So the limit of a doorway or of an entrance is 10 amas wide. If there's a door frame, that would mean 2 posts and a cross beam. So then then it's clear that it's a door, and you don't need to diminish that. It could be even wider than 10 amas. Okay, so the Gemara says, Tanan Hassan. We quote a Mishnah from Sukkah. It says, Sukkah shigavay l'mayla mesramama psula. Let's say someone builds a sukkah and he puts the schach above 20 amas. So that means the walls of the sukkah 20 amas high, and the schach is on top. So that's puzzle. That's the Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda, which sounds familiar. Rabbi Yehuda is the same Rabbi Yehuda that we have here. Rabbi Yehuda says it's okay. So just like by us, by the mavoi, by the alleyway, if the cross beam that goes across is higher than 20 amas, so the first opinion says that it's invalid, and Rabbi Yehuda says that it's valid. Same thing by the sukkah. The first opinion says that it's invalid, and the second opinion says that it's valid, that it's good. Rabbi Yehuda says that it's good. Now, that's in general, but the specifics of the way it's written are not exactly the same. Now, Tosfos mentions here that you didn't start off with, you started in the middle. You didn't say what you're supposed to do to a mavi to make it permissible to carry. You didn't say that you can put a beam on the side, you can put a cross beam across. You didn't give me all of those details. You jumped right in telling me that if it's too high, there was no introduction there, what you need. So Tosfos says, well, it wants to be similar to the Mishnah and Sukkah. The Mishnah and Sukkah is the same. The Sukkah that's too high, that's how the Mishnah and Sukkah starts out. So that's how Eiruvin starts out. It's too high. So it wants to make it parallel. Now, based on that, the Gemara has an interesting question. The Gemara says, Maishna gabi Sukkah detani psula v'gabi mavi detani takanta. Well, now there's a problem. By the mavi, it tells me the solution. It says if it's higher than 20 amas, so diminish it, lower it down. By the sukkah, it doesn't give me any solutions. It just says you're out. There's psula. So what's the difference? If you wanted to make it parallel to the Mishnah in sukkah, so you should make it parallel, and you should say psula, or maybe the opposite. Maybe by an Eiruvin should say, maybe by Eiruvin should say psula, maybe the Mishnah and Sukkah should say Yomi. The Gemara answers like this. Sukkah de'iraisa tani psula. Mavi de'rabanan tani takant. Well, it depends what we're talking about. By the Sukkah, the height of the Sukkah is a biblical law as well. Rashi points this out because the pasuk says, so that the generation should know that you're in a Sukkah. And the problem is, that if it's too high, the schach is too high, then you don't know that you're in a sukkah. You're in a room. You can't see the schach. The difference between a regular room and a sukkah is the schach. And you have to know that you're in a sukkah. So therefore, if it's too high, it's biblically invalid. However, by the mavoi, is all a rabbinic law. So Rashi puts it like this, that by Sukkah, there's a book of laws that precedes the Mishnayos. So comes along the Mishnayos and tells me you didn't satisfy those requirements that it's written in the Torah. So therefore it says psula. But by the Eruv, by the Mavi in Eiruvin, there is no book of laws that precedes this. All of this is all rabbinic law. What's rabbinic law? Rabbinic law is the Mishnayos. So when you're telling me the law for the first time, you have to tell me how to do it. So therefore it says, Yomi, you put it down. You can't start out saying, you're out. You didn't tell me how it's done. If there's a law that I read beforehand, then you can tell me, oh, you didn't satisfy that law, so you're out. But if it's the first time that you're telling it to me, so tell it to me the way that I'm supposed to do it, which that's the Mishnah. The Mishnah would need to tell me, the rabbinic law would need to spell it out, what I'm supposed to do. Should be instructional, as opposed to the biblical law, which the Mishnah doesn't need to be instructional. The Mishnah is telling me that you didn't satisfy that law. That's the way Rashi learns it. Tosfos has a different shot. Tosfos says that psula is more forceful. So because it's a biblical law, we want to tell you that it's possibly from the evidence. That's by the sukkah. By the mavoi, it's less forceful. So it says Yomi, it means you should lower it down. Now, if you don't, it turns out that it's not valid anyway, but we're not so concerned that you're going to make a mistake. It's a din b'diavad as well, it has to be lower. But by the biblical law, we need to be more forceful. The Gemara gives another possibility. Could be that even a biblical law, it could tell you the solution. How do you resolve a sukkah that's too high? It could have told us, you lower down the schach. The problem is, why didn't it do that? But by a sukkah, that Mishnah has 3 halachas in it. The resolution, the solution for solving each one of those problems is different. One of them is that if the sukkah is too high, you lower it down. If it doesn't have enough schach, you have to add more schach. If it's too low, you have to raise it up. If it's If it doesn't have 3 walls, then you have to add another wall. So the solution would take too long. And because the Gemara, the Mishnayos, likes to teach everything in short, Daf Yomi, so it just says, Psula. That way it doesn't have to give me all those details to teach the Mishnah. But by the Mavai, the Loina Fisha Mile, Fisha means a lot. Its halachas are not a lot. So Tani Takanta. So it just says Yemayat. It's interesting. The Mavai also has several halachas here, but all of them are the same. They're all Yemayat. It just says you diminish it. If it's too high, lower it down. If it's too wide, diminish it. It means make it more narrow. It's the same word. You diminish the size. Okay. That's a discussion of just the Gemara starts out comparing our Mishnah to the Mishnah in Sukkah. Now, what's the basis of our discussion itself? What are we discussing here about the entrance of an alleyway, how high it's allowed to be? So, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says in the name of his teacher, Rav. Rav Yehuda is a student of Rav. This is not Rabbi Yehuda from the Mishnah. This is Rabbi Yehuda from the Gemara. This is Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel. He says, Chachamim leilamdu al mipischa shel heichel. The sages that tell us that a entranceway is 20 amas, that they learn from the entranceway to the sanctuary. If you look in Yitzi's background, you can see the Beis HaMikdash over there, the Lego Beis HaMikdash. So the part that's protruding upward, looks more white than the rest of it. So that is the sanctuary. Now, in the Mishkan itself, the sanctuary had 2 parts. It had the sanctuary and the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKodashim. When they built the Beis HaMikdash, they added on a hallway in the front. It's called the Ulam. Ulam is the hallway. So the sages said, what's the comparison to the Oyel Mayed when I compare that over to the Beis HaMikdash? The sanctuary. So they say, how big is the entranceway to the sanctuary? It's 20 amas. So therefore, they say that if you want a doorway, what's considered an entrance? 20 amas, because that's what we have written in the Torah. We have, as we'll see the verses. We see an entranceway, and it's referring to the entranceway to the tabernacle, which tells us over to the Beis HaMikdash, 20 amas. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, the comparison goes from the entranceway, not to the sanctuary, but from the entranceway over to the hallway, to the Ulam. Now, the Ulam was much taller. The Ulam was 40 amas tall, 20 amas wide. The height is double the width in these. So the Heichal, the sanctuary, is 20 amas high, 10 amas wide. The Ulam is 40 amas high, 20 amas wide. The question is, where are we learning from? Are we learning from the sanctuary, 20 amas, or are we learning from the hallway, which is 40 amas? That's the machlek. It's very easy. The Tanan, as was taught in the Mishnah, Pischa shel Heichal gavaya esrmam barach v'yesramas. Esrmam barach v'yesramas. The entranceway to the sanctuary is 20 amas tall and 10 amas wide. Shalulam gavayo arbayim amma barach v'yesram amma. And the hallway is 40 amas by 20 amas. 40 amas by 20 amas. So we have an opinion. We have an explanation here for the Chachamim. We have an explanation for Rabbi Yehuda. Okay. We did something interesting here. We didn't know Rabbi Yehuda held that there was a limit. We just said it could be over 20 amas. Now we put a number on it. We turned it into 40 amas. It's interesting. We didn't have that clear in the Mishnah. They both learn it from the same pasuk. It says, "V'shachatu Pesach Hayil Mayed," that you slaughter the sacrifice at the entranceway to the tent of meeting, which that's in the Beis HaMikdash. They say, what's the entranceway to the tent of meeting? What's its parallel in the temple itself? See, this verse is referring to the tabernacle. That's when the Jewish people were traveling in the desert. when they settled in Israel, they built a full structure, a temple. What's the parallel to the tent of meeting? The parallel is the sanctuary. Am I freezing? Is my internet slow? Or is it? 1 second. Let me just see if I can. Maybe that'll work. Okay, so the parallel to the tent of meeting, to the Oyel Mayed, would be the Heichal, which is the sanctuary. Now, what is the hallway in the front? So that has its own status. There's a difference. Rashi points out the difference between the hallway and the sanctuary is that if you would attempt to perform the services that are meant to be in the sanctuary, you do it in the hallway, it would be invalid. The hallway is not the sanctuary, according to the rabbis. That's what they're saying. So the holiness, the sanctity of the sanctuary is one thing, and the sanctity of the hallway is different. And so therefore, when you sacrifice it at the entrance to the tent of meeting, it's the entrance to the sanctuary. That's only 20 amas. When it says the entranceway to the tent of meeting, it's referring to the sanctuary, 20 amas high. Rabbi Yehuda, on the other hand, he's the one that says it could be higher. He holds that the hallway is also considered the same sanctity as the tent of meeting, same sanctity as the sanctuary. And anything that you do that's meant to be in the sanctuary, you do in the hallway is also good. It's just one large sanctuary. So therefore, when it says you sacrifice the animal at the entranceway to the tent of meeting, what's its parallel in the temple? The hallway, 40 amas. We see that an entranceway could be 40 amas. Okay. When does it say the entranceway to the tent of meeting? It's referring to both of them. Another possible pshat. He gave one way of explaining the machlekes, that the machlekes, the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda, is regarding how we correspond the temple to the tabernacle. Is it the sanctuary or the hallway? According to Rabbi Yehuda, we can say the same thing, that the hallway is not considered the sanctuary. What's the reason for Rabbi Yehuda? Because the ksiv el pesach ulam habayis, because the verse says at the entrance to the hallway of the chamber. Now, Taisus points out that there's no such pasuk. This pasuk doesn't exist. It's a combination of two verses. And what Rabbi Yehuda is doing is he's taking these two verses, he's combining them together, and he's saying we see the word entranceway associated with the hallway. That means that the size of the doorway to the hallway, which is 40 amas tall, that's good enough for us. We see the word entranceway associated with that. For the Rabbanan say no. Those are two verses you're combining together. It says, Iksiv, because of Pesach Ulam, if the verse actually said what you're claiming it says, then you're right. If it would say the entrance to the hallway, then you're right. That means the hallway would be considered an entrance. And now that it says the entranceway to the chamber, to the sanctuary, what it means is the hallway has two doorways. It has the doorway into it, and then it has the doorway into the sanctuary. So it's referring to the entranceway of the hallway that goes into the sanctuary, which we know is 20 amas. Okay, so either they're comparing the oil mayad to the sanctuary or to the hallway, or they're studying another verse and they're discussing which doorway on the hallway is it referring to. Is it the front doorway, which is 40 amas tall, or is it the second doorway, which is 20 amas tall? Now, all we're really looking for is a source in the Torah where we have entrance and the size that's associated with that entrance. And then we'll know how big an entrance is according to the Torah. And that's really what the discussion is so far. The Gemara asks the very basic question, what are you talking about? You're using this verse. This verse is only said in the tabernacle. It's not talking about the temple. There was no temple when this verse was said. They were in the desert. Gemara says, Ashkechan Mishkan Ikri Mikdash. Mikdash Ikri Mishkan. Well, we find that there's a crossover between the Mishkan and the temple. The temple is called Mishkan, tabernacle, and the Mishkan is called temple, Mikdash. And so therefore, when it says the laws by the Mishkan, it's also referring to the same laws by the temple. If you don't say so, and if you say that each one is its individual halacha, Hadam or Rabbi Yehuda or Shmuel, this is what Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, Shlamim sheshachtam kedem psulim. If you slaughter a sacrifice, a peace offering, too early in the morning before the doorway of the heichal are opened, so then it's invalid. As it says, you shall slaughter it at the entrance to the tabernacle, to the tent of meeting. Tent of meeting was in the tabernacle. Where do you get that if you slaughter it before the doorway of the sanctuary, which is in the temple and the base of Mikdash, where do you get that it's invalid? The verse only says in the tabernacle, which is in the traveling sanctuary. It doesn't say it in the actual temple. It must mean that there's a crossover, that we compare the two. Only when the doorway is open and not when it's closed. That's when you're allowed to slaughter the sacrifice. But that verse is written in the tabernacle, regarding the tabernacle. It doesn't say about the base of Mikdash. Rather, we find, based on the statement that what Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, Rabbi Yehuda had two teachers. Rabbi Yehuda is again Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel. He learned by Rav, and he learned by Shmuel. We learned already one statement that he said in the name of Rav, that the Machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama is regarding the parallel to the tabernacle over to the temple. And they're arguing over if it goes to the sanctuary or if it goes to the hallway. Now we have a statement of Rabbi Yehuda in the name of his second teacher, Shmuel. After Rav passed away, Rabbi Yehuda went to Shmuel. And here the statement goes that if a peace offering is slaughtered too early, before the doorway of the sanctuary is open, so it's invalid. So that teaches me, in the verse that he uses is a verse that's taken from the tabernacle, that teaches me that the temple and the tabernacle are the same. Okay, the Gemara says, Bishlem and Mikdash Tikri Mishkan. Can understand that the base of Mikdash, the temple, is called a Mishkan. It's called a Mishkan, it's to dwell. It says, I will place my dwelling amongst you. So the Mikdash is called Mishkan. That verse was said when the Jewish people were on their way into the land of Israel. And God is telling them what's going to happen. He says, I will place my dwelling place amongst you. They already had the tabernacle. They already had the Mishkan. God must be telling them that he's going to place his dwelling place in the base of Mikdash. That they didn't have yet. They're being informed what's going to happen. So we find that when it says dwelling place, Mishkan, it's referring to the base of Mikdash. So we see that you can use the same word for the base of Mikdash. It could be called Mishkan. But where do we know that the tabernacle is called Mikdash, base of Mikdash? The Gemara offers a suggestion. Maybe because it says, the children of Kahas, one of the families of the Levium, they would carry, when the tabernacle moved, when the people moved from one place to another, they carried the holy vessels, the Aron, the Ark. So maybe when it says over there that they carried the Mikdash, they carried the Mishkan, and the Mishkan is called Mikdash. And it says, no, just turn the page, over there it doesn't mean Beis HaMikdash, over there it means holy. It says Mikdash, Mikdash means holy. The holy vessels. It's referring to the Aron, it's not referring to the Beis HaMikdash. It's not referring to the Mishkan. They didn't carry the Mishkan, they carried only the Aron. Okay, Elam Mehacha. We have another verse, very popular verse. You will make for me a sanctuary and I will dwell amongst you. Well, what was that referring to? It's referring to the tabernacle, at least at the beginning. It's referring to a lot of things. But one of them was the tabernacle. And so we find that the tabernacle, the Mishkan, is called Mikdash. Va'asuli Mikdash. Okay. We've just resolved the issue. And we had a machlekes in the Mishnah. We explained where we got this from. We're looking for the term entranceway and how high that entranceway would be. So we have two possibilities, either 20 amos or 40 amos, because we're comparing it over to the Mishkan. And we know that the Mishkan and the Mikdash is the same. So therefore we have two doorways. One is 20 amos, one's 40 amos. That's the machlekes. That was one way of learning. By the same as that they're learning from another pasuk.
Rabbi Smith.
Yeah.
How Rabbi Yehuda the Gemara compares this Mishnah to the Mishnah in Sukkot.
Right.
Rabbi Yehuda holds that it could be up to 40 amos. How does that work? Because we know that Sukkah can't be higher than 20 amos.
So that's interesting. Rabbi Yehuda holds by Sukkah that it's kosher if it's higher than 20 amos. The Tanakama holds that it's possible. In Sukkah, he holds that it could be higher. How much higher? Based on what we learned right now, only 40 amos. There's a Bryce over there that says 40, 50 amos. It's a problem. According to what we learned, it's only 40 amos. You see, over there, the Gemara explains, at least there's an opinion over there that holds. It's an opinion that holds that a sukkah could be a permanent dwelling. That would be Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. So therefore, it could be very strong structure, very high. It could be 40 amos, 40, 50. Over here, what are we talking about? We're just talking about an entranceway. So he happens to have the same opinion, but the logic seems to be different. He just likes big doorways. That's what it comes out, because the logic is different. Could be, we'll see in the Gemara that what we're really discussing is, are we looking for a marker across an alleyway that tells me where to stop, and I have to be able to see it? And up to 20 amos, my eyes will reach, just like by the sukkah, that was one of the opinions. So I can only, if I'm looking for a marker, a demarcation, a line that's going to tell me, don't cross this line while you're carrying something. So it needs to be 20 amos. That's the opinion of the rabbis, of the Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda holds, I'm not putting a marker there. I'm actually making a door, making a wall. It's actually a halachic, a fictitious wall that the halacha accepts. Now, for that, I don't have to see it. So it could be even 40 amos. That we'll see in the Gemara, more discussion. But anyway, that's the original comparison. It was to Sukkah. And it happens to be that the opinions are the same, Tanakam and Rabbi Yehuda. This one says there's a limit of 20, another one says it could go higher. Bein l'Rabban and bein l'Rabbi Yehuda, lialfu mi Pesach shara chatzer. Why don't they learn from the entranceway to the courtyard? In the tabernacle, there was a sanctuary. It was very small. It was 10 amos tall. the whole sanctuary. We didn't learn from that. We took its parallel over to the temple, which the doorway was 20 or the front doorway was 40. But now we're asking sideways, the width. Asking on the width. What was our Mishnah? The width was 10 amos. The width of a doorway could only be 10 amos. How wide was the entranceway to the courtyard? So the ksiv, it says in the verse, the length of the courtyard was 100 amos. Yitzi, do you have a Lego Mishkan? Not in the background. I can't hear.
Smith.
Yeah, yes.
Doesn't Rabbi Huda doesn't say anything. He only says on the height. He doesn't say on the width. Can we make
so far we don't know anything about the width. You're correct.
Can we say
right.
That as he goes on the height, he can go on the width?
You have a good point. You're asking, Yassi's asking that Bein LaRabban and Bein LaRabbi Yehuda, there was no discussion over there about the width. It's a good point.
I was going to say...
Hold it a little bit.
I was going to say the same point. Yossi just jumped in quickly.
Can we make a Kalvachaymer that as he goes on the height, he can go on the width?
We'll see soon. So we have a verse that says, we're discussing the courtyard of the Mishkan. Verse says that the courtyard was 100 amos. It's going to be 100 by 50. 100 long, 50 wide. Barachav chamishim b'chamishim. B'kaima. How long were the curtains that surrounded the courtyard? It wasn't a real wall. It was like curtains that had pegs. And b'kaima chamish amos. And the wall, the height of the curtain that surrounded was 5 amos tall. That's what it seems like from here. Uksiv. And at the entrance to the courtyard, so at the entranceway to the courtyard, there was a shoulder. It's called a shoulder. What a shoulder means is just that it's a part of a wall. So I have the courtyard. It has 3 walls, and then the entranceway has the whole structure. The whole courtyard is 50 amos wide. I have 15 at the entranceway on this side, and 15 on the entranceway this way, which tells me that there's a gap, an opening in the front of 20 amos, because 15 and 15 would be 30, and the entire width is 50. It means it's 20 amos in the center. The Gemara asks like this: Malahalan chamesh breicha vesrim, afkan chamesh breicha vesrim. Just like the entranceway over there was 5 tall, the Mefarshim say ignore the 5 for this. Why it's put in there? The main point that we're looking at is the 20. Just like over there, it's 20. So to over here, it's 20. The width of a doorway could be 20. It says over there, does it call it a Pesach? Does it call it a Pesach? Bes Masach Pesach Shara Chatzar. Yeah. There's a verse that calls it an entranceway. So the Gemara says, Pesach Shara Chatzar Ikri, Pesach Stambala Ikri. It's not really called an entranceway. It's called a courtyard entranceway. We're looking for an actual entranceway. How big is an actual entranceway? That could only be 10 amos wide. More than that, then it has to have some second modifier. Courtyard entranceway, that could be wider, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the term entranceway to be associated with 10 amos. That's what we're going to have. We don't have. You're claiming that you have that you have an entranceway associated with 20 amos. It's not really an entranceway. It's a courtyard entranceway. Viva Yasema, give you another pshat. Tiksiv klaim chamish esrei ama lakasef begayvod iksiv. What the Gemara just did in this sentence is it left us without any information about the size of the entranceway. It says what the pasuk you thought was referring to was a lip that 15 amas that comes out in the front from the sides, which takes up 30 amas of the area of the entranceway. That's not accurate. When it says 15 amas on this side, 15 amas on that, what it's really referring to is 15 amas tall. That the partition in the front was 15 amas tall. How big was the entranceway? We don't have any clue. We have no idea. Okay, that resolves our issue. We had to ask the question. We know for a fact that the entranceway was 20 amas. Why does the Mishnah say that an entranceway can only be 10 amas? We resolve it by saying you don't have any facts over here. All you know is that it was high 15 amas. You don't know anything about how wide it was. It doesn't tell us. How high was it? We'll have to have some tradition for that. But it wasn't an opening of 20 amas. Umar is very surprised. It says, Goiva, you're telling me that 15 amas is talking about the height? That the verse says clearly it's only 5 amas tall. What are you telling me it's 15 amas? Umar says, There's different versions of this Gemara here. But basic is that it was 5 amas taller than the Mizbeach. The Mizbeach, according to one opinion, was 10 amas tall. It says it's 3 amas. That was 3 amas from the Soviv. But it was actually 10 amas tall. Then the partition was 15 amas. So when it says that it was 5 amas, it means that it was 5 amas above the 10 amas of the Mizbeach, which is a total of 15. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda, okay, that's where we're holding right here. We tried to learn from the entranceway to the courtyard that it should be able to be 20 amas wide. We say we don't have no proof for that. Rabbi Yehuda mi Pischei Shalulam Gamar. Does Rabbi Yehuda actually learn from the entranceway to the hallway, which was 40 amas tall, and that's why he holds, we're going back to the height. But we have a Mishnah, this is, Yossi, you brought this up a minute ago. But Tanan Varachav Mi'asra Mesimayit V'lei Palig Rabbi Yehuda. If Rabbi Yehuda actually learns from the height of the hallway, which was 40 amas, how wide was the entranceway to the hallway? It was half the size of the height. It was 20 amas wide. If you look at our Mishnah, it says that an entranceway needs to be 10 amas. If it's larger than that, you have to diminish it. It needs to be 10 amas wide. If it's larger than 10 amas wide, then you have to diminish it. You have to put posts to close off part of that entranceway. It's too wide. Does Rabbi Yehuda comment on that? It doesn't say anything. It doesn't say anything. What are you telling me? He learns from the hallway what's considered an entranceway. The entranceway to the hallway was 40 by 20. He should have commented in the Mishnah and told us that it doesn't need to be only 10 amas. It could even be 20 amas. The Gemara says, Amar Abaya Palig beBraisa. Yeah, he doesn't say anything in the Mishnah, but he says in the Braisa. The Tanya, we have a Braisa that says clearly. Braisa is a Mishnah that was not inserted and didn't make its way into the edited text of the Mishnayos. The word bar means outside. Braisa means in the unedited version. We have it in a Braisa, something on the outside. For Rabbi, maybe like the Sichas Kaidash versus the look at the Sichas. Okay. So we have a Braisa. It says the Tanya was taught in a Braisa. V'arachav miyad amas yimayit, Rabbi Yehuda me'en tzarech l'mayit. It says if it's wide, 10 amas. If it's wider, wider than 10 amas, you have to diminish it to 10 amas. And Rabbi Yehuda says you don't have to. Why not? Because he learns from the ulam. See, he says in the Brisa, this opinion, we have it clear, there's no problem. The Gemara asks, it's not so satisfactory. It says, "V'liflig b'masnisin." So why was he silent in the Mishnah? Let him argue in the Mishnah as well. Let him say that you don't have to diminish it. The Mishnah says anonymously, unanimously. It says, "V'arachav mi'asar amas yumayit." No one argues. So the Gemara says, "Palik b'gayvav v'adin l'rachva." That's what it means. When he argued about the height, he also meant, it says that you don't have to diminish, he also meant about the width. You don't have to diminish the width. Rabbi Yehuda Me'ein Tzarech, that's referring to what it was said before and what was said afterwards. It's interesting. It's not so easy to read it into the Mishnah, but that's what the Gemara is suggesting. Rakati, nevertheless, still, Rabbi Yehuda mipischa shalulam gamar. Does Rabbi Yehuda actually learn from the entranceway to the hallway, which was 40 by 20? But we have a brisa that says the following: an alleyway that's 20 amas tall, and there's a crossbeam that goes across, and you want to be able to carry in that alleyway. The problem is that it's above the crossbeam is above 20 amas. You have to lower it down. That's the first opinion. Rabbi Yehuda machshir ad mem v'nun amma. Yehuda says it's okay, 40 up to 40 or 50 amas. A little bit of an issue here. 50 amas throws us off. 40 amas would have been great, but he says 40 or 50 amas. It's another problem. Why does it, if it's 40, if it's 50, then why does he have to say 40? That's another problem. Tosfos asked that in Sukkah, Tosfos asked that. But here, we have a different problem. If you're learning from the entranceway to the hallway, to the Ulam, so it's only 40 amas. Where do you get 50? The Brisa goes on, it says, V'tani bar kapara ad meya. Bar kapara taught that you have until 100. Bishleim bar kapara guzma. According to bar kapara, when he says you have until 100, he means just an exaggeration. They said 20. He said, no, you have until 100, because 40 amas is huge. So he meant, no, you can keep going, but not setting it as a limit, just as exaggerating. Keep going. Don't worry, you're not done yet. Yeah, it's fine. So he says 100. Ela Rabbi Yehuda, my guzma. A little bit of an issue in this Gemara. What he meant to say, what I want the Gemara to say, is Ela Rabbi Yehuda. It doesn't say Rabbi Yehuda, it says Rav Yehuda. Guess what the Gemara means to say is Ela Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. But according to Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, that said before, that where does Rabbi Yehuda get his opinion from? He learns it from the Ulam. He learned it from the entranceway to the hallway, because the sages learned it from the entranceway to the sanctuary. What do you mean an exaggeration? There's no exaggeration there. It works out well according to Rabbi Yehuda. I think the Bach adjusts, takes out the Rabbi Yehuda, puts it in all Rabbi Yehuda. We don't have to go back and explain according to that. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that he learns it from the entranceway to the sanctuary, to the hallway. So 40 amas is good. But where do you get the 50 from? Rav Chisda says, Ha masnisa ati isei l'Rav. There's a brisa that misled Rav. Now Rav is referring to the way we started this Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. He says that the sages know the height from the entranceway to the sanctuary, to the Heichal, and Rabbi Yehuda knows the height from the entranceway to the hallway, which is 40 amas. That misled, that's Rav's statement. Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Rav, was misled to saying that by a certain brisa. What does the brisa say? The Tanya was taught in the brisa. Brisa says that if you have an alleyway where the entrance to it is above 20 amas, you have to lower it down. If it's above 20 amas, its expression is higher than the entranceway to the Heichal. If it's higher than the height of the sanctuary, which was 20 amas, you have to lower it down. So Husava, Rav understood, if the rabbis are learning from the sanctuary, from the Heichal, Rabbi Yudin Piskal Shalulam Gamar, and Rabbi Yudin must be learning from the hallway. So he understood that the Machlekes, the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda, is sanctuary or hallway. But it's not so. Rabbi Yehuda mi Pischa de Malchim Gamar. Rabbi Yehuda learns from the entranceway to palaces. Nothing to do with anything in the temple. He happened to know that entranceways to certain palaces of kings was higher than 20 amas. So he says it's good enough. Now it could be there are sources that entranceways to certain palaces were written about. Maybe an entranceway to Achashverosh, or does Rabbi Yehuda know how tall it was? I guess somehow he knew the height of it. Any other place in Tanakh where it says entranceway, referring to a palace, and it was taller than that. So there we have a source that it could be higher than 20 amas. Well, if it could be higher than 20 amas, then why are you limiting it to 40? It could be even 50. Okay. But Rabbanan, imi pischa shel heichal gemiri liboy dalsas keheichal. If the rabbis are learning from the entranceway to the sanctuary, then why don't they require doors? There were doors there. If you're saying that what's considered a doorway is 20 amas by 10 amas, where do you know that from the entranceway to the heichal, to the sanctuary? Well, you're missing one factor. But there were doors. By here in your alleyway, it's entirely open. So Gemara says, Alama Tanan, why was it taught in the Mishnah? How do you prepare an alleyway for carrying, to be able to carry that on Shabbos? Beishamir requires a lechi. A lechi is a post, vertical post, and a kaira is a crossbeam. He says you need like 2/3 of a doorway, a post and a crossbeam. That's Beishamir's opinion. Yisrael says no, you only need either a post or a crossbeam. That's enough for an alleyway. What are you talking about? You need doors if you learn from the Heichal. The Gemara answers that there were doors there, but those doors were not part of the doorway. It was a doorway without the doors. The doors were there for a second purpose, not to make it into a doorway. The doors were there just for modesty. People shouldn't just be looking in. So those doors were different than doorway doors. Those doors were modesty doors. Okay. The Heichal Tzuras Pesach Haveloi, Afilohachi Yes Ramas Uderavach. If the rabbis are learning from the Heichal that the limit of the height is 20 amas, and don't ask me about the doors because the doors happen to be there, but they're not really what we're going to learn. The last part of the Mishnah says that if you have a door frame, that means 2 posts with a crossbeam on top, lentil on top, so then it could be even wider than 20 amas. It could be even wider than 10 amas. That's our width. It could be wider than 10 amas. I can prove to you that it can't be wider than 10 amas. Why? Because the Heichal had a door frame. Forget about the doors. It had a door frame. And how wide was it? 10 amas. So how do you know that a door frame could allow a mavi that's larger than 10 amas wide? In the Heichal, it didn't allow. It didn't. I'm not talking about allow. It wasn't considered a doorway with a door frame wider than 10 amas. The whole door frame was only 10 amas. Why does it state in the Mishnah that if there's a door frame, if it's wider than 10 amas, you don't need to diminish the size, the width of the doorway? The Gemara says, Midi hutaima ela l'Rav. This is only an issue according to Rav. Rav says that we're learning from the doorway of the sanctuary. Amasni le Rav Yehuda lechia bar Rav kamei de Rav ena tzarech l'mayet v'amalei esnai tzarech l'mayet. Yossi commented on this before. The statement, the last statement of the Mishnah that says, even if it's wider than 10 amas, you do not need to diminish the size. That's the way the Mishnah was in the hands of Rabbi Yehuda. Now, Rabbi Yehuda was teaching the son of Rav. Rabbi Yehuda was a student of Rav, and he's teaching Rav's son. I guess sometimes a student could also be a tutor. So he's teaching the son of Rav, Chia bar Rav, and he tells him, you don't have to diminish it if there's a door frame there, which is the way it says in our Mishnah. Amalei, Rav says, that's not the accurate version of the Mishnah. The correct version of the Mishnah is tzarech l'mayet, you still have to diminish it. If that's the case, that a doorway needs to be, a door frame is only works if there's 10 amas there. The question is, why do you need a door frame? You only need a lechi or a kaira or whatever. That will also work. But if that's the case, then we learn it actually perfectly from the Heichal. And who says that we're learning from the Heichal? That we learned from Rav. Rav says we learned from the Heichal. Who says that it needs to be only 10 amas? Rav. So for Rav, everything works. Okay, let's leave it over here.